Hello crafty friends, it's Donna here, and I have a set of 4 cards for you today. I've been playing with a cake die from Paper Rose Studio, and I've got 3 weddings and a birthday. A big welcome to you all, whether this is your first video or you've been here from the very beginning. To start out with, we'll use the die in its simplest way, and then we'll start to switch it up and make a couple of shaker cards before extending the die to make a slimline card as well. I'm going to start today by making my own paper. I'm using my ink pads direct to paper to create some peach and coral coloured paper. And by paper, I mean 80-pound cardstock. This is actually fairly thick. I've grabbed a range of inks from my drawer, some much brighter than others. But the interesting thing is that although this is the colour that they're going on, dye inks are a lot like watercolour in that they dry back a lot. So I'm not too alarmed yet. Once those panels had dried, the one on the left was a little bit stripy at that middle section. So I went back over the light section and let them dry again. Here you can see a before and an after of how the inks behaved. Let's start on the simplest card. This is the Lots and Lots of Rectangles die. It cuts a bunch of frames, and I've used it previously with white and gold, and so this time I just grabbed one of the frames from the stash that I keep in with the packaging. This is a metric sized die, so it's perfect for anybody that lives in a country that uses metric. So Europe, Oceania, Asia, you're going to be happy with this one. Next, I masked off the outside and spattered the inside with some new to me Gunsai Tumby paints. To my surprise, when the paints dried, that coral dried towards the outside of each spatter, and it looked like dripping blood. And so I went back in with a water brush, reactivated the paint, and then used a paper towel to sop up some of the extra so that it dried back to an apricot colour. Nobody wants to see a cake dripping blood. As we construct the card, I've got 2 little tricks that I use to help line everything up correctly. I've used the cake die to cut a cake from one of my papers, and I've also cut a cake stand from gold and one from white card, and 3 cakes from white cardstock. And so I've layered up that cake stand 2 high, and the cake pieces are all 4 layers of paper tall. Whenever I want to line something up straight, I use a scrap of paper. As long as it's one that I haven't hand cut, then I know that the corner is 90 degrees. And that works just as well as a tea ruler. In order to place the pieces of the cake, I'm using the negative from one of those die cuts. And I've snipped in, going left, right, so that I don't cut the whole thing apart. Then it's simply a matter of gluing my thick pieces of card into those gaps. While the glue dries, I'll attach my sentiment, which comes from a set called Black and White Sentiments. This sentiment is printed with black ink onto white card, and so I'm just quickly running around the edge to hide that white. Using the paler of those 2 pieces of paper I made, I'm going to make 2 different shaker cards. And so this time, when I've cut the cake out, I've been careful to cut it very neatly in the middle. And I'm also going to use a pierced rectangle die to cut out that panel. I've been very careful to put the pierced rectangle die also very central on the paper. And so you can see at the top of the screen there, a small border still attached to the die that I'm going to use later. This time I'm making a USA sized card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Next, I've put a whole lot of double-sided tape on the back of my cake panel, and I'm adding some acetate, which for me means some scrap packaging. The next layer is going to be double-sided tape. And when doing this layer, it's really important that you don't have any holes, because otherwise whatever you're using as your shaker element can escape. Now some of the places are easy enough to put on thicker pieces of tape, but I decided I would like to have each part of the cake have its own sequence so that they didn't all fall to the bottom. And so I needed to cut some super fine pieces of tape for those areas. And when I do that, I like to use some kitchen paper and stick my tape to that so that both sticky sides are covered. That way I can cut strips as thin as I want without my scissors getting sticky or having that annoying thing happen where the tape sort of folds over onto the blade of your scissors. The sequin mix I'm using today is a very old one from Little Things from Lucy's Cards, and most of this mix is suitable. The biggest of the sequins will only fit in the bottom 2 windows, so I'm just picking those out. And then there is also one lovely 3-dimensional element that's not going to work in any of the windows. And so I've taken all of those out before doing the card. Because this shaker is so complex, I'm leaving it face down on the bench and adding a little lid to it. This is a scrap of paper that I stamped earlier, and I'm putting that down with the white side facing forwards. I've chosen a thin paper for this so that it doesn't muck with the height of my tape. And then I'm adding a final little bit of tape around the side and flipping that whole panel over to glue onto my card. I'll add a simple sentiment at the bottom, and the first of the shakers is done. The next of the shakers is constructed in a little bit of a different way, because it's almost a whole card shaker, but it needs a little bit of stability in the middle. Here's the frame from the earlier card. I'm going to add the acetate to the back of this. I always choose double-sided tape for anything that's going to touch packaging because a wet glue gives it little ripples where it got wet. Next is the layer of foam tape, and I'm being very careful to plug every little gap. This time I'm going to construct most of the picture inside the shaker. So I'm using the same trick to add the cake to my card base, and then before I add the cake stand, I'm just placing my sentiment where I want it to be without any glue yet so that I can position the cake stand. I'm going to add that congratulations sentiment to the outside of my shaker and use it as a hidden place to give some extra stability to the card. I'm going to use the same shaker mix. Once again, taking out those lovely 3D gems, I'll have to use those for something else. Once I have everything positioned, I'm going to stick my sentiment to the front with some double-sided tape. Next, we're going to do a little bit of secret engineering. I'll make a space in the middle and add some double-sided foam tape to the back of the sentiment, and that will just hold up my front panel in the center. Once that's done, the card is ready to put together. The end result has got beautiful dimension with different elements at different heights. For the last card, I'm going to extend the die to make a slimline card. Now, as someone who's about to move countries, the last thing I should be buying is cardstock, but I could not resist these Shimmer cardstocks. And so here we are. I'm going to mix and match them to make a shimmery rainbow for this next card. I'm also going to use this footage to work out which sheet came from which pack, because I have to admit I got so excited that I jumbled them all up. My rainbow was almost complete, but I thought it needed some yellow, and so I added some gold shimmer cardstock, which has exactly the same shine to it. I then cut small pieces from each colour of cardstock and ran them through the die cutting machine. You can see where the little piece is missing from the pink sheet on the right. I'm going to pop them all up with foam tape, and I've stuck the cake plate down with glue. I've used a stitched slimline border to cut that white panel and also to cut the coloured panel behind it. A nice simple card to finish with, but one that allows you to use even a small die for a large card. I hope you've enjoyed this video and these cards, and that we'll get to spend some time together again really soon. Until next time, stay safe, feel free to like or subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.